You preempted me. Great, thanks. Good to see a lively, alert, and humorous bunch of folks over here. So good morning, everyone. I hope you had a good time at day one. We had fantastic sessions with 25 speakers. How many of you were not here on day one? For whatever reason, you missed a fantastic bunch of sessions. Okay, a few people. Don't worry, we'll have a conference report for you at the end of the day, or rather early next week, and you can see some of the key highlights. Some of the presentations will also be available online afterwards. We'll share the link with you so you can download the presentations. We've got a packed agenda here today, and we're going to finish a bit early. You will notice we are crunching some of the breaks, and we're moving some of the other breaks a bit later so that we can finish a bit early today. So on day two, we've got, as you can see, a keynote on regulating for growth, and we're going to keep the focus more on interactive discussion. We'd like a lot of inputs from you, questions from you for the panelists, suggestions from your own about the work you're doing, and so on. So we've got about 6 panels: future networks, private networks, affordability, startup ecosystems, sustainability, diversity, and connected Ethiopia. And we've got a fantastic group of moderators as well to take the discussion ahead and get all your inputs. So our first panel for the day is going to be on a topic very near and dear to most of our hearts, which is future networks, what's happening in the future. Yesterday's focus was more on foundations and what has been done so far. Today, we're going to take a look at where are we headed, what can we do to accelerate digital transformation across Africa. So the first panel is future networks, and to moderate this panel, let me invite on stage Naoll Merdassa, Dr. Naoll, I should say, advisor to His Excellency, the Governor, National Bank of Ethiopia. Welcome again, Naoll. He did a fantastic session at yesterday's panel. We look forward to some more insights from him today. Joining him will be Yilkal Abate. Let me invite Yilkal to please come up on stage. Yilkal Abate is the president of the IT Association of Ethiopia, ICT-ET. Please come up on stage. Also with him is Utpal Bhowmick, Senior Director of Middle East and Africa for Hughes. So Utpal, will you also please come up on stage? Thank you. And I guess we're looking for Yilkal. We'll track him down and bring him here. So without further ado, please put your hands together for our first panel fireside chat of the day on future networks. Over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one chair here. Anyone brave enough? Bradley or to that will be third round, so we can do second round. Thanks everyone. I think we'll begin before we do so. Just this is a future networks. Imagine if we had a crystal ball. You know, what would we see? Especially from the industry and then the experts' perspective. This was supposed to be a panel, but I would call this now you are on hot seat. You're the only one. Please go ahead and introduce yourself, your name, your organization, and the industry you are in.
Thank you, Naoll. So to introduce my name is Utpal Bhowmick. I'm the Senior Director of Sales for Middle East and Africa. I'm managing key accounts Middle East and Africa for my company, Hughes. Hughes is a #1 global player into satellite ground segment VSAT networks. And we've been working in Middle East and Africa for more than 30 years, more than 20 years in Ethiopia. We are proud partners with Ethio Telecom and a couple of ministries here. Our main, the main motto of a company or the logo of a company is connecting the unconnected, which is the verb. So basically we are able to provide high-speed satellite broadband services, extended backhaul, and backhaul to telecoms and businesses and governments. And that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Thank you. The first question is, in the past few years, how have networks increased, improved, or transformed? And what was the impact in terms of connectivity, rural connectivity, price, and speed as well? How have they improved?
So again, I'm going to talk about satellites because that's my forte. I would have, had there been other people, yeah, we would have had more flavors of the networks. But how the satellite networks have evolved, satellites started with a very basic connectivity network that somebody only probably being used by the military or specific government agencies, very, very regulated. But overall, over the last 20 years or so, it's evolved into as a communication backbone for the governments and businesses. we have now evolved into very high throughput satellites. We have now LEO satellites coming up, other than GEO. And satellites provide the main communication backbone for high data intensive applications for both businesses and networks. It is able to, we have a big impact on connectivity. We are able to connect the underserved areas and the remote areas where the normal fiber and microwaves are not able to access. Heavy terrains, mountains, islands, and everything can be connected using satellites. And a big example is the telecom infrastructure. Most of the MNOs today are basically dependent on satellites to connect the remote areas because in order to expand their 4G and 5G infrastructure. So yes, satellites have evolved primarily from a basic communication to a communication backbone for the underserved areas. And the impact we've had is on connectivity, of course, providing connectivity to the underserved. We are providing information access, providing mainly the common man is able to access a lot of internet information as well as emergency response system that can be deployed. A lot of crucial connectivity can be done on satellite. And finally, I think the impact has been on economic growth as well, because more the people are connected, more economic growth, we bring in more growth to the economy and scales.
Thank you. I think satellite has done a great job, especially connecting the rural areas. However, the challenge is bandwidth, speed, and it's been improving the past few years. How's the pace of improvement of the speed and the throughput? Are we closer to at least parity with, if not fiber optic, but at least other connectivity aspects? Because it remains, like you were saying, a backbone, right? Is it getting closer to being the primary mechanism for at least commerce and connectivity?
Absolutely. Look, we cannot compare totally fiber because there are economies of scales involved there. But yes, there is a big evolution, and we are getting closer. We have now new constellations from GEO to LEO. Earlier it was very high. The main challenge in satellite was building a complex satellite and building it up. It's very costly. And then trying to get the cost back and get the revenue back from that cost. Now with the new networks, LEO, we have economy of scales. We have the device-to-device networks, NTN coming up now as well. So you can now make calls through satellites direct from, you don't need roaming, you don't probably need in future, maybe you don't need a telephone number or a roaming number. You can basically roam using a satellite connection. So that is the evolution. Yes, we are getting closer. It is still complex. There are still challenges with respect to costs, with respect to building a talent framework around satellites. But I think we are getting closer to the other bits of communication.
Thank you. Great to hear. What would be an effective partnership with maybe other satellite providers or other type of network providers, even though in theory you're competing, but economy of scale as well as synergy to ensure price as well as connectivity reach? What type of partnerships you are exploring?
Well, first of all, for a company like Hughes, we are like a dual. We are like not only a ground segment player. We also own our own satellites. We provide our own satellites. So we have like 5 to 6 satellites over North America and Latin America. We have our own broadband services for our customers with 1.5 million subscribers. And whatever innovations we do for our own customers, for our own network, in terms of technology and innovation, we bring it to the international market as in terms of equipment. So in terms of partnerships, we are looking for a lot of data collaboration of data and sharing of data. I think mainly with the satellite providers in terms of what kind of satellite what kind of information is there, and how we can have standards for infusing. Our ground systems are compatible, but literally, I mean, we are accepted on around 50 satellites around the world, including excluding our satellites, all the satellite owners. So our main collaboration has been data and standards. Of course, we are also looking at collaboration on investment on ground segment, a lot of ground segment systems where we are looking at collaboration, how we invest there. Should we invest? What are the models? Should we be revenue sharing? Should we OPEX? Should we manage services? Yeah. How do we invest in the ground segment? Because, you know, satellite there, but the ground segment is country-wise based there. And then, of course, final is, I think, the regulatory aspects. We are also working with the market access team to regulatory for spectrum. Some countries we go in and provide our services, and some countries we have to have a regulation of how the beams are landing, how the data is landing there. So the regulatory aspects is one of the partnerships or collaboration we are looking at, not only with the satellite operators, but the other stakeholders in the country, which is the regulator and the market access teams.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Please, a quick introduction about your organization as well as yourself to the audience, please.
Thank you, and apologies for the traffic glitch. My name is Yilkal Abate. I'm the president of ICT. ICT is a private sector ICT Companies Association. It has been in operation since 2010 for about 14 years now. And we help to expose, engage, and enable tech companies in this sector. And we provide a number of services, including public-private dialogue, policy proposals, conference and exhibitions, competitions, and partnerships with tech companies outside or actors outside who want to collaborate with actors here.
Thank you. Since you've established the association, you said since 2010, have you seen any kind of increase in terms of players in the ecosystem? You know, type of network service providers, type of content providers, and you know, various industries joining maybe by coming to your association, or what you've observed in the past few years?
Yes, I mean, when the association started, we're just getting started to pass the dial-up stage of connectivity in Ethiopia. But since then, the network coverage by the incumbent has increased over time, including by efforts, including from efforts from our association. The virtual ISP license was provided, and I think some number of companies acquired that license and started providing the ISP services. And that experience, I think, helped lead to the opening up of, partly led to the opening up of the telecom sector, where there's a second operator that entered in the name of Safaricom. But generally, in terms of content providing companies, telecom, infrastructure-related services companies, we have seen an increase. And as you have seen since the entrance of the second operator, there has been a launch of 5G networks. The quality of the telecom network has improved over time, partly due to competition, and also you know, the increasing criticality of the infrastructure for all kinds of economic activities in the country. The prices have come down, the user base has increased. There is now a shift towards catering to the needs of enterprises that we see by the CSPs as well as the ISPs also. The new data center companies have arrived or joined the ecosystem, providing opportunity for cloud solutions and carrier-neutral data centers as well. So overall, it's become economically more significant. It's also been supported recently by strategies like the Digital Ethiopia 2025 and other digitizing efforts in the ecosystem that lead to the increased activity in the telecoms and network space. And we see this evolving further into new areas. Maybe perhaps we'll discuss it later.
Thank you, Yilkal, about that. My next question is, what are some of the emerging technologies on a cutting edge, if you will, on a bleeding edge that your R&D is working on and looking at and getting closer to bringing it to mass market? In relation to that, do we need new partnership approach, maybe regulatory framework, depending on what type of technology, emerging technology is coming up? The regulatory framework, the policy would need to remain ahead, I would say. So what are the areas that you're looking at in the next few years so that policymakers are prepared?
Okay. So talking about technology, I think the main, I'll speak about 3 points. First point is basically we are looking at a lot of software-defined networking and network function virtualization of the networks. So this is going to be a focus area not only for telecom but also for satellites infrastructure going forward. So everything less of hardware, more of software. Define everything can be moved very optimized, networks can be optimized virtually, and we can optimize efficiently use our resources properly, and the virtualization of resources, that's going to be a big factor going forward. So SDN and NFV, like we call it, it's going to be one of the major things going forward. The second thing will be, we're talking about, edge computing and cloud computing. That's going to be probably one of the main factors coming up, and what we as Hughes are working on is having most of the hardware or structure either on public cloud or private cloud in a premises. So basically, if we have let's say a spread out ground segment infrastructure, we have a common management or common servers which can be used for data processing, data computing, and the compute power is increased with edge computing. So there's no delays in or latency with IP processing and all those things. So that is one of the second part of the technology that we're looking at. And finally, I think the buzzword is AI and machine learning. Okay, so the network has to evolve learning itself. It has to automatically learn whatever the network management function. It has to be. I mean, what we are working as Hughes in the R&D is. We are making sure that the network NMS function is AI enabled and there's machine learning enabled there. So all the issues today that we face, the machine is automatically learning, and the network tries to fix itself automatically before there's a human intervention. So those are the few things we are working on. Now, of course, we are looking at a lot of support from policymakers. First of all, on regulatory aspects, because cloud computing, you cannot have always servers in the country. You may have distributed. On the regulatory aspects of it, there's cost and investment involved from the government. Those are something we are looking at from the policymakers and shareholders. And of course, we look at the country's talent framework. We need local and external resources. So evolution of the talent framework is again we need engineers. We have a market access guy. We need financial companies. So those are things we need support. We need from the policymakers and the shareholders.
Thank you.
If I may
Go
add.
ahead, please.
So the way we see it, I think there are certain imperatives that are driving innovation and what is likely to come in terms of networks in the future. One of which is the investments required to expand 5G services is quite high relative to the earlier technologies. So the telecom operators need partners to help them innovate around how they can commercialize that 5G infrastructure. And part of how that potentially will end up happening is, for example, by having technologies that allow you to automatically or autonomously allocate sliced parts of the network for specific use cases. So if you're, for example, streaming or playing a video game with your friends online, you'll need, relative to a person just browsing text on the internet, more bandwidth. But if there is a technology that allows you for that period where you're consuming that high bandwidth, or you need to consume that high bandwidth, automatically give you a different service level from the network. So the networks will need to be programmable the way software is programmable in the future. So some companies already, industry actors, leaders are developing this technology to help the operators commercialize it. I think the other thing is also with connectivity becoming ubiquitous, including the Internet of Things, the speed with which you will have to adapt to changes in the network will increase, and in some cases it will be humanly impossible to do that manually because they happen so fast. So you will need to do a lot of autonomous technologies to help you sense, think, and help the network act by itself based on trends, like my colleague Utpal said, using machine training and AI technologies as well. There will be, I think, the concept of digital twins introduced. Networking already is available in some places. With smart becoming a more prominent trend, technologies that allow networks to be self-healing, self-protecting, are likely to become more prominent. So this also means, just like there is APIs for software, there will need to be APIs for a network infrastructure from which other stakeholders can connect to and be able to interact based on the use case and the needs they have. So all of that technology in some way is already being developed. I think it will become more mainstream in the coming few years.
Good, thank you. I think a follow-up question to you would be, yes, the innovation, the research and software-defined network, as my colleague was saying, artificial intelligence, dynamic scaling, dynamic routing, dynamic bandwidths you were referring earlier would require a robust regulatory framework, because when you're doing dynamic routing, dynamic scaling, dynamic bandwidths allocation, it has price implications, therefore requires regulatory framework with which you get into a contract with your customers, right? For that, are you working as an association with relevant institutions in the country to ensure they are better prepared when that technology is ready for the market?
It's a good question, Naoll. Yes. If you look at, for example, the speed of change in some of these places, oftentimes it would mean you have to learn as you go. And as a result of that, the way you regulate may need to incorporate much more components of a sandbox approach, where you observe instead of having a clear black and white position initially, the use cases, the technologies, and how they affect economy, society, and so on, and along the way develop the guardrails if they are required. And that would require more communication, more listening, and engagement with the private actors. As you know, for example, yesterday on the panel, there's an internet exchange being established here. That is currently getting up and running under a sandbox approach. It's new to us, it's not new to many other markets, having an internet exchange. And then also there is a need about sustainability and conserving energy, for example, right? So the networks of tomorrow, and some of them are already here, will need to be smart enough, for example, to switch themselves off where there isn't traffic, to switch themselves on, when there is traffic, and there's specific technology that needs to be built for it. So in all of that, I think there is a need for closer communication and alignment between regulatory bodies and actors, private sector actors in this space.
Wonderful, thank you. From your perspective, right? You're in the industry, you're on the market, you're doing research, R&D, you're trying to improve your services and end product, and you have upcoming enhancement where again, it requires regulatory update and change. How closely are you aligned with regulatory body in a market that you serve, so that you're providing the information, what is in a pipeline, such that the body, the regulatory policymakers are aware and being prepared? How close are you with the industry policymakers?
Right. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of regulatory work that needs to be done, and we are very closely working with the regulatory for each country that we are in MEA specifically. We are working on. There are so we are closely working with the regulators, especially the TRA, telecom regulatory authorities in each countries. Mainly on the, main regulation is the ground segment regulation, and in terms of the putting a hubs, making sure landing rights are there, spectrum allocation, those things we are very closely working with. And of course, at times we need to work with an expanded shareholders as well to understand how we can, because the satellite and the technologies can be internationally, it can be in the space, but we need the ground segment infrastructure has to be very country specific, and it is serving the people of the country. So at times we need investments from the government to have to invest in the ground to understand what investments can be made with the government. So we are very closely working with funding for ground segment infrastructure. Now, other than this, yes, spectrum regulations, that is something. Sometimes we need to provide a service, like we are talking about NTN and NTN services, device-to-device services. We need license aspects. We are working actually closely with some of the countries in Middle East and Africa to have those NTN and regulatory licenses to provide IoT kind of services and there. And other than that, yes, sharing information and knowledge, because the main objective of the regulatory body is to ensure that the data, the speed and data to the telecom users is properly available. So we are sharing that we as satellites, what we can do. We always be sharing, we are evolving from GEO to LEO to this NTN satellites, S-band satellites, how we can improve the user experience, and of course, what is the cost, and so we keep sharing information on those aspects. And of course, the final point is we seek support on a lot of R&D as well. How do we improve your networks? We seek an input, and that's how our R&D improves as well. So those are a few points we are working at with the regulators. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think that's great. The regulators or policymakers, in most cases, lag behind the industry because the industry is a commercial activity. They invest a lot in research and development. However, policymakers are always trying to catch up, right? Therefore, I think in some countries, the industry provides some sort of research, think tank, so that research papers are out earlier than the market, so that the policy, the regulatory framework is ready by the time the technology is ready for the market. What are your strategies to accelerate the digital transformation in the market you serve, and your recommendations? I think in some cases, price is a barrier, right, for any adoption of any new technology. From a business perspective, what is your price evaluation and price setting so that the newer technologies are adopted quickly, kind of maybe offsetting an initial price from the government angle? Some businesses incentives, you would get a 10-year tax break, for example, right? Returning that, flipping it the other way around. So if you have new technology, why don't you provide a 10-year price reduction, half off, or maybe it will be paid in 20 years because most of countries in Africa, resources are limited, and newer technologies are pricey, so price becomes a barrier. What are your strategies along those lines?
So, yes. So first, to be honest, our main strategy is to promote international collaboration. So because we are an international company, we are globally working with all the companies. So one of the things is to harmonize interoperability. So obviously the product and what we need is available to all global markets and acceptable in all global markets. So we are working, taking inputs, like we said, from the regulatory authorities, from all the countries, specifically in MEA. Me and my team working as a market access, from a market access point of view, trying to take the inputs and making sure that the technology that we bring in is harmonized and is not customized for a specific country. We have this fusion network, which can work through both satellite as well as LTE. You have modems which can work on satellite as well as LTE, and it switches automatically. Now those LTE bandwidths cannot be specific. LTE bands cannot be specific to a specific country. It has to be globally acceptable. So the product has to be designed in a way that the LTE bands are we can launch in all the countries. So we are trying to work to harmonize the technology in a way that we are able to. It supports interoperability across countries. Now, for this, we participate in all kinds of market access and regulatory agreements. Apart from that, the point is from a pricing point of view. Okay, we look at some kind of incentives from the government to put on investments or put on ground technologies. But on the other hand, our strategy is also to have a risk assessment from a political angle of the country or from a revenue part of if we put so there has to be a proper risk assessment for which there has to be a cooperation with the local authorities as well. And apart from that, we need a lot of agile regulation. We are also working on changing the regulation frameworks to have more agile regulation. So the spectrum regulations or the license regulations adapt to the technology. Like if the LEO technology is coming, we cannot probably the design of the LEO or the new framework of satellite probably doesn't allow in-country hubs or in-country pops everywhere. So you might have to work from through a connectivity from across the country or to some other country. And how do we? So the framework has to adapt to these technology changes if you have to use those. So those are the few strategies we are working on from a policy making point of view.
Thank you. Yilkal, you want to add?
Sure. I think, the mindset needs to be innovative. Another trend, for example, in this space is the emergence of private networks. That happens even on packet core wireless networks. You can build now private networks, technologies available. And that means maybe there's approaches that need to happen about, relicensing from an operator to provide that service. It could be in a remote place where there's mining, there isn't infrastructure already, or it could be an airport where there is a need for it, or any other use case, for that matter, for industrial automation and so on. So the innovative approach will be more important. If you say, for example, there is a mandate to cover even remote areas with telecom infrastructure, right? And there is a universal service and access fund. And the way that has been used previously may have to change. It may be that some of that resource needs to be used to build specific kind of skills, not just to expand a network. And even when you do that kind of network expansion, the regulatory approach may need to embrace, for example, community type of networks. And that may mean, for example, these small companies that provide a community network, or the community itself organizes it, may need to get into a roaming agreement with the big operators. And then the operators will say, well, I have coverage in that area, but it's actually being run by a small business that can structure itself to be cost effective within that context. So there needs to be a lot of learning and sharing where the regulator is going, and also where the technology and the ecosystem actors that drive the sector are also going, to be in better sync in terms of regulations, making it commercially viable for the ecosystem, and to continue to have positive externalities for the consumer and other users of the networks.
Great. I think great suggestion and great strategies to ensure the services for local areas are kind of aligned with what the local area needs, right? That's where I think in some cases countries and governments would have to choose expanding 5G in rural areas versus clean water, right? Not all solutions are created equal, right? So you have to look at what the local context and the local problems are, and providing solutions. Any kind of hurdles or challenges in expanding in the continent, I would say, in Africa for your organization?
No, in fact, I'm taking the cue from my esteemed colleague here. On the community networks, yeah, this is again something we're working on. We have a concept of community Wi-Fi or community LTE, and that's another something that we work with the MNOs as well as local ISPs. That we have a local Wi-Fi environment. People can connect to a Wi-Fi with some local with some small recharges, and these recharges can be very application specific, and the same can be for community LTE. Now, from a MNO MNO may not have access to the particular area, but it has license, so it is working with another ISP to serve a local community as a common local LTE, which is able to invest locally and work with the bigger MNOs. So it needs a lot of collaboration at a particular level, but from a technology aspect, we make it happen. We make it that we have the technology to have a community LTE or a community Wi-Fi network.
Great. Yilkal, maybe this is a question for you. Maybe you can chime in as well in terms of content moderation, because we've seen in the past few years, as much as that connectivity and content production is useful for advancement and development, the flip side is in some cases it can be toxic, if you will, and in some countries they are considering regulating, banning, age restrictions for content type. Any interest from the association to ensure what the society consumes on the internet is useful and ensure the community is not harmed?
That's a tough question. It's an ongoing concern that is being discussed. And I mean, you may have noticed much of content nowadays, or at least there is a shift towards content that is completely AI generated, right? So that trend is going to, I think, exponentially grow in the coming years. AI has very many advantages, but there's also risk areas that need properly managing, including hallucination, and sometimes even the tools are not fully understood already by the bodies that develop them. So if you look at European Union, they already are putting out regulation around AI. AU is also initiating discussions around it. I think robust discussions will be the way to navigate how to extract the best from this explosion of digital content and actors, while also mitigating the risks, and that could be because of social engineering and hacking, for example. So financial risks, societal risks, or like you said, underage persons, extreme and violent activities. To the extent possible, it's best if the industry self-regulates, but it may not always be possible to have perfect regulation by itself. But even then, I think a continuous dialogue to get the right balance about regulating, AI or AI-generated content, or even human-generated type and content is required. And I think it's something even the companies themselves that host this kind of content are grappling with. And I think a big part of the solution would be also the technology that can help you cope with that explosion. So it's like, you have to also automate to sense and react appropriately to these things. But it's not something that only the regulator by itself or our association by itself or a company by itself will be able to solve. It needs to have a cross-disciplinary approach, is my thinking right now.
How about self-regulating from the market?
Yes. So honestly, we are more on the transport side or the bandwidth side. We provide the medium for them to look at the content. And there's always an ethical dilemma from whether to provide free will to the user to look at the content or to the. So our strategy has always been to align with the laws of the land, the regulators, and we provide legal intercept access. It's as per the government or the telecom regulator. If the government wants to switch off 5G or they want to restrict some content, it is a legal intercept. We are generally on the transport law provide. So we are generally aligned with the regulations of the country and the whatever the government policy is.
Thank you. Question from the audience?
We can squeeze in a couple of questions. Yes, I can see a couple of hands up.
Hi, I'm Bradley Shaw here from Link Global. Question for Atul from Hughes. You keep talking about direct-to-device in terms of your satellite space, and that's L-band and S-band as far as I'm aware. Are you expecting mass public adoption of L-band and S-band? The news over the last year has been fairly negative in that kind of direction. We've seen the Iridium partnership with Qualcomm dissolve. I think the only mass market device currently that's got S-band and L-band in it is S-band. I think it's the iPhone 15. Are you expecting that to kind of grow over the next couple of years?
Hang on, let's take the other question. Will you?
Okay, thank you. I have two questions. First, I would like to appreciate your discussions regarding to our panels. So the first question is, in terms of the Ethiopian startup or ecosystems, there are barriers or challenges regarding to financial and sponsoring program. Then what is your contribution regarding to this financial gap or constraints regarding to budget, finance, and sponsoring program? What is your assignment or what is your supporting regarding to this startup and ecosystems? The second question for Indians, I think India has a vast technology resources and different companies in your country. What is your best experience regarding to supporting startups for Ethiopians? What is your suggestion? What is your best experience telling those experts or professionals or startup towards the contribution of technology in Ethiopia? Thank you.
Thank you. My question is actually, my comment rather, it's a short comment in respect of one of the questions that was raised. And that is to say, the question regarding, I think, 5G deployment and water. I mean, there was a question that came up when I was just coming into the room. And I just thought, really, they are not mutually exclusive. I mean, they're not at cross purpose. You can do your 5G because the revenue you get from the 5G auction, for example, can actually be used to fund other government services. Now, if we are talking about subsidizing for rural communities, normally the general well-known way of doing it is universal service provision funds. Now, in universal service provision funds, you can actually use that for telecom purposes, but government can still get its revenue. Now, let us not forget that if you don't allow for the auction of the 5G, for example, spectrum, you don't store it. The value is lost. So the sooner you do it, the better, because you can get the revenue and channel it to other sources. Thank you.
Comments, responses from any of you?
Okay, I'll start with the first question. To be honest, S-band and this S-band constellation, I understand currently the mass market device that you're talking about is in one of the iPhones that we have, and it's only used for emergency calling over North America. That is the only service available. But it's not just handsets that we're talking about, and it's IoT, a lot of IoT small modems, satellite modems that can work with basically the sensors. And there are applications across industries. We can have vehicle tracking. We can have oil and gas pipeline monitoring. We can have wastewater pipe monitoring, where the sensors can work out with this thing. So it's not just handsets that are going to be the mass market device. I think the mass market device is going to be small satellite modems that Hughes is working on, which will interact with the local IoT sensors, like the LoRa devices or those devices, and then that can relay real-time information from the satellite to the ground segment. So that is one aspect. Secondly, on the market, we expect the market to grow. There is an assessment, I don't have the numbers, but it's $1 billion market that is coming up, the NTN and the IoT market, where it's not only the handsets that are going to evolve, but also these IoT sensors and market and integration, a lot of integration work that will be done for device to device or network end-to-end that is going to come up. We have S-band satellites right now covering the Europe and the North Americas. So those services we are providing for enterprise right now, but we have plans to come up with a global network of satellites, S-band satellites, and this is our plan to launch in the next few years to provide these kind of services. So it's not just the mass, it's not just handsets that we are talking about, it's the mass market. Okay, it's basically the IoT devices, mass market. The second question I think from India, you were speaking about the talent framework sharing. Yes, we have a lot of talent framework. I'm representing Hughes here. It's actually not India, it's a international US company. Yes, we look at a lot of international cooperation from various, we are a global company, headquarters in US, and we look at a lot of international cooperation, trying to foster talent. We are sharing technology, trainings, and a lot of research papers with our partners here. And of course, we are also promoting education and those kind of aspects. So yeah, in those cases, we are again contributing to the local talent forums there. Now, I didn't get the other question, so maybe.
That is more of a comment.
Supporting the startup ecosystem in Africa.
Yeah, like we said, we promote a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship. Of course, we have our startup ecosystem here. We do a lot of mergers and acquisitions as well. So yes, we are looking at whatever innovations are happening around the world and how we can support or fund startup innovations in Africa. We've had some joint ventures on the Middle East side, but again, those are we are open to try to do a risk. I mean, there's always a risk assessment factor, how this technology will evolve, how this area will evolve. So we do a lot of investments as well as mergers and acquisitions to support this startup innovation.
Thank you. Yilkal, do you want to add?
I think to the question about the startups, yes, we try to support. We are involved in the development of the Startup Act. Now, I think converted into a Council of Ministers regulation and is in the process of being implemented. In it, there is provisions for a fund, but also by ourselves, we have tried to connect startups in the ecosystem to angel investors, and we have had some successes in facilitating that. We continue to, in the absence of not sufficient capital being available for early stage companies, we continue to create connections with Africa-focused VC funds that may be interested in looking at opportunities in Ethiopia. And as you know also, there is a new capital markets or stock exchange just established. It will launch within this year. And that has an innovative component in it that can be used for startups or growth companies with crowdfunding. And it remains to be seen how it will develop, but I think it's that kind of innovation Ethiopia needs to, like doing things a little out of the box to solve, myriad of problems we have.
We can have offline discussion about the capital market, and then my friend, the 5G versus the clean water, coffee time. I'll take up your 3 hours, and we can discuss metaverse versus malaria meds as well. We can have that conversation. I think we're run out of time. Thank you.
Very well said. Yilkal, Utpal, and Naoll, thanks so much for a fantastic panel discussion. A big round of applause, please, for the 3 speakers for spelling out